Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is the garden question and answer video that I do pretty much every Sunday. You can ask gardening questions down in the comment section below the video, and that's where we pick from each week. I think I picked about 24, 25 for this week, and there are more than that. So thank you guys again for participating in this video, because without you, there's not a subscriber question and answer video. Holly is out here. I don't know if she's in the frame. I'm sure she will be at some point. It's a cloudy morning, Saturday morning before the Sunday morning when you'll see this. We had a good amount of rain going on there for a while, and then now it seems like the last couple of fronts that have come toward us have just kind of died out right before they got here. So we're getting a hair dry again here in this area. I looked like there was a lot of rain on the other side of the mountains, but the mountains just kind of died as it came across yesterday, and we got a few drops of rain, but that was it. Okay, so Steph and I have been putting together a weekly garden planner that we're selling over on my website, HortTube.com. I have the Learn to Garden video series already, and it's actually getting 6 new videos between the last 2 weeks of March and during April. So the new thing doesn't in any way affect that. But the Learn to Garden video series is more about the basics of gardening, just learning design and installation and other things. This weekly garden planner is broken down into, we're basically dividing every month into 4 weeks. I know there's more than 4 weeks in the month, but there's 4 point some weeks in every month, but we've just divided it into week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4 for March. So far, we've put up March, April, and May. 3 months are up, and I really like it. We're basically breaking task down that you would do at the beginning of March. Let's say March week 1. We're dividing the task down into short form video format. So there's like 12, 13 videos just for that week 1 in March, and they're 1 to 3 minute videos is basically what they are. But there's already over 100 videos up on it as it goes up for sale right now, and there's a temporarily through August 30th initially going to be a $30 off code, just capital weekly, just spell out weekly as the code, is a $30 discount up through April 30th. By April 30th, we'll also have June, July, and August up as our plan. We've already shot some of June already, but we're starting this off. We already have 3 months in place. We're in Raleigh, North Carolina, zone 8A, and so my weekly garden planner, you'd be doing these things a little later if you were in in colder areas, and you'd be doing things a little later. Back that up. If you're in warmer areas, you'd be doing things a little earlier, and in colder areas a little bit later. So, and I've got some videos on that. There's an introduction video about that, just kind of, when I talk about my average last frost date, it's around April 15th here. It might be April 30th where you are. It might be April 1st where you are, and you can just adjust the calendar to that. But we're pretty proud of the work we've put into it so far, and it will eventually be 12 months. And just like the Learn to Garden video series, it's going to continue to get content, because I'm sure there's things we missed as we're going along. There's going to be things that task for April that we'll be doing during April, and I'll go, oh yeah, this is something else we do, and we'll shoot a video for that and just add it in later. So it's going to continue to evolve. Once you buy it, it's yours, same as the Learn to Garden video series. And again, we're pretty proud of it, and thank you guys for considering purchasing it. It's over on my website, HortTube.com. And again, that discount will be all the way through April 30th. Okay, let's see. Videos that would have gone up this week, a neighborhood walking tour, and we started out at a landscape job we had put in last year and showed off a little bit of that. We'll eventually show off the rest of that garden as well. It's a little bit, there's some weeds in it right now. It needs to be mulched. But when the maintenance is caught up on it, we don't maintain it, but when the maintenance is caught up on it, we'll do a full tour over there other than just a few plants. Let me see. And we did a tour in this landscape earlier in the week as well. Just a lot of things. I mean, you can see it's burst into life back here. I think Steph counted yesterday 19 different daffodils in bloom, which is kind of fun. And then there should be a transplanting video going up today. I don't know if I'm going to get that finished editing or not. We moved a big shrub from this house over to the other garden that I showed off in the walking tour. Okay, let's get to some questions from last week. Thank you guys so much for considering the weekly garden calendar. Also, on the Learn to Garden series, again, like I say, there's going to be 6 videos going up the last 2 weeks of March and the first 4, and the 4 weeks of April. I already got those figured out. One's already shot. Okay. The first 3 questions are all very similar, so I'm just going to combine them together. So one of them was combating English ivy, one of them was staghorn sumac, and the other one was smilax. I've got smilax and English ivy back here on the back of this property, and we've basically pushed the English ivy back, repeatedly cutting it down and then burying it in wood chips back there. So we basically built a wood chip barrier, and it's still going to creep in here. There's nothing I can do. A neighbor's, somebody else owns that property. I mean, what can I do about it? I don't think, honestly, it's one of those issues that kind of bothers me, just as a neighborly thing. If somebody's back garden is full of vinca or English ivy or any of these, non-native invasive things, I just kind of don't feel like they have the right to, have it right up against your property where it creeps over, onto your side and makes maintenance for you. It's just, I think that I would probably say something if I had a neighbor that was planting English ivy or had it right up to the border that, it's not how I want to spend my weekends dealing with your English ivy infestation. But anyway, that aside, that's how we've pushed it back. The smilax, the person with the smilax, they were mowing it off, wanted to know if it eventually disappear. Yes, but it takes a long time. Those smilax can be this big around under the ground, or this big around under the ground, just depending how old they are. I worked at a garden center. This may have been in a video recently, but or we were having a conversation. Oh, we were just having a conversation with somebody. Steph and I worked at a garden center together when I was around 20 at the time when we were working together. And the gentleman who owned the garden center, his father had started the garden center. He actually sold smilax to people. There was a trend for a long time of people putting smilax vines up over their doors. But if you buy a tiny smilax, like this big, the underground portion, it takes forever for the vine to grow up and over the door. And so he was selling big, even back then they were $150 because they take a long time to get big, but you need one that's that big in order to cover a trellis or door or something like that pretty quickly. And again, there was like a trend in North Raleigh where everybody wanted a smilax vine growing over the door. And it's quite pretty. I mean, they're beautiful evergreen vines when they're well maintained. But when you get them as an uninvited guest, they can be very hard to get rid of. We have one over here by the fence that we've cut off repeatedly. It needs to be dug out, but I planted other things over there before I dug it out, and it just comes up through an osmanthus over and over and over again. I don't see it until it's 5 feet tall every time, because once it gets big underground, it can grow back super, super fast. Slow time. This much growth on one that's small underground, this much growth, within a couple months when it's well established. But you can dig them out or keep cutting them off, but if you're just cutting them off, it's going to be a long, long time. But all of these invasive questions I get, and I can go through every single week and do these questions about all of these invasive plants, whether they're native or non-native. They feel like they're taking over their garden. It's always the same answer. It's actually in that weekly garden calendar. One of the short form videos I shot was just start on it. You got to start on it. You got to mow that stuff back. You've got to push it back. You've got to spray it back. Mow it, use a weed eater, whatever it is, start cutting on it sooner than later. And what you need to do is you need to win a little bit at the time. You don't have to go out there and erase the whole thing at once, but you got to get started pushing it back. So that ivy, I'm 4 years into fighting it. And now I've gotten it at least 10 to 12 feet back, off of this back line. So I have a defensive space now, and I have about 6 inches of wood chips back there. And I finally feel kind of comfortable with it, for a minute. But it's 4 years of just slow and steady progress fighting it back. It's really difficult to go out and get it all at once. But make sure you're always winning. that you're always doing the pushing and it's not doing the pushing. And take care of a little bit of it at a time, and eventually you can clear out a big space a little bit at a time. Okay, but now a bunch of mulch questions right in a row. Okay, is double shredded mulch as effective as triple shredded mulch? And can you find triple shredded in bags? I don't understand this thing, because when I was a landscaper, we called it double shredded hardwood mulch. And now the same exact thing that's on my driveway out here, because we're mulching the garden, and you'll see that in an Odd Jobs video this week, we're mulching the beds. Now they just call it triple shredded hardwood. I don't know if the shredder got worse and they had to shred it a third time, or they just called it triple so that they could charge more for it. I have no idea. So your double shredded hardwood mulch may in fact be the exact same thing as what I'm ordering as triple shredded hardwood mulch. I don't know what happened there, but at some point along the way, the shredder got worse. I don't know. Can you find triple in bags? Yes, you can find hardwood mulch in bags. It tends to be a little more expensive than some of the really super inexpensive 5 for 10 mulches and 4 for 10 mulches that you see at the box stores this time of year. It tends to be a little more expensive. And if you can order anything in bulk, I would suggest if you can, order it in bulk, because, but all those single-use plastic bags, are not doing us all any favors. I pull into the parking lot at one of those places, and I see this time of year where they're preparing for those 5 for 10 sales, and it's just an ocean of plastic wrapped around bags of plastic, and that's all I can see. And in fact, I searched garden beds the other day. Just Google search the word garden beds. Garden beds, those 2 words. And all that comes up now, if you search garden beds, is raised gardens. Like somehow we went from, that's the only description of what a garden bed should look like. Obviously this is a garden bed, right? My vegetable garden is a garden bed. But now the only thing is a raised garden bed. People have been sold so hard on raised gardens. And every time I see lots of raised gardens like that, all I can see is plastic bags, because there's plastic bags filling every one of those raised gardens. This is more plastic, more plastic. If you can order anything in bulk, I try to, just because, single-use plastic is just not one of my favorite things, as you can tell. Okay. Do I have to use hardwood mulch, or can I simply use leaves and pine needles? Yeah, you can mulch with whatever is available to you. And, cost is an issue. When I was a young, I bought my first house in my 20s, middle 20s, and started my landscape company at the same exact time. And I had no money. I was making a mortgage payment and, a kid on the way, and you know how it is, and every dollar I had was going into a piece of equipment or something like that to actually grow this business. I was getting the mulch from the municipal dump in Raleigh for my garden in Johnston County, and I was, anything that I could use, the leaves that were in that garden, I'd shred them or not shred them, but I wasn't spending any money. There are and I buy this mulch, it's triple shredded hardwood, because it's going to make the yard super decorative for a period of time in the spring while people are watching content on this channel. But these leaves are totally adequate back here. And in fact, I could go and get some more leaves. I could have gotten more leaves from my neighbors and just shredded those and probably had it looking a little better as shredded leaves. So yeah, all those things are great. Pine straw does not improve the soil, and I've said this before, as much as other things do. It just seems like pine straw shrinks more than anything. Like, it's got a lot of water content, so it just gets smaller and doesn't add a lot, but it does the same job of covering the soil, hopefully preventing a few weeds, holding some soil moisture in place, and all the other things that mulch does. It just doesn't seem like it adds a good, rich humus layer, compost layer to the soil as quickly as other things do. But leaves, yeah, all of these things, anything that you can cover the ground with organically is absolutely fine. And of course, again, for me, I spent years, trying to figure out how to, I'm ordering giant loads of very expensive mulch for customers, and then, not having that same money for my own house because I was trying to grow my business and other parts of my life, at that time. Everybody knows that that struggle with a young family and that kind of thing. So, use what you have at hand, and you can make the leaves look a lot better if you shred them. They look better shredded than they do whole, like they are out here in this garden right now. Okay, so a person used pine bark mini nuggets instead of soil conditioner. Do you recommend digging up the plants? No, not at all. I've used, the pine bark soil conditioner is just really fine ground pine, and then mini nuggets are slightly bigger, and then they have nuggets like this. They tend to use the mini nuggets and the nuggets as top dressed material, but those mini nuggets will be fine buried down in the ground. They're not an issue. What I've done in the past, if I had to buy mini nuggets and I couldn't find soil conditioners, I've taken a screen over top of a wheelbarrow and I've spread those mini nuggets out on top of the screen and basically rubbed it back and forth and got all the fine material out of it and used that as my fine pine material that I could mix into the ground, and the rest of it just went on top of the soil. So that's an option. It's just to screen the mini nuggets. There's a lot of fine material in it. Okay, another channel said gardeners need to turn old mulch with a weasel or a pitchfork before adding new mulch. The only reason you need to do this is if you had been piling mulch up too high. So we're trying to start an engine where soil microbes are breaking this mulch down at about the same pace that we're putting it down. So we're leaving just a bit of mulch, which is where I'm at right now. I've got probably this much actual wood sitting on top of the ground, wood fiber, and bark from the hardwood. Last time I did the hardwood mulch. Then I've got those leaves that dropped out there, and now they've thinned down to almost nothing, and I'm gonna put a mulch layer on top. If my mulch was 3 or 4 inches thick right now, I would not be putting a decorative mulch layer on top. It was the problem we had at the other house getting started on that landscape job that I showed off earlier in the week on the neighborhood garden tour. There was this much mulch. The landscaper was like, hey, this is the day we mulch. This is the day we mulch. This is the day we mulch, until the mulch had piled up this deep. And you dug down in it and there were dry pockets in it. The rain couldn't even wet this material all the way through. So the life down at the bottom of it was really struggling. Nothing was down there to break it down. That's when I would use a garden weasel or something to break it up, to make sure that water is able to penetrate it. Because this mulch can mat down so tight that water doesn't penetrate it as well. That's what was happening on that property. So the only reason I would need to turn it with a pitchfork or a weasel would be as if it's gotten too thick. And if it's gotten that thick, I'm not gonna remulch until it breaks down some. So even if I'm doing what they said, I'm not immediately gonna put mulch over the top of that. And if I can avoid it, I don't wanna turn this mulch over out here. It's a form of tilling, and tilling is killing, so you're exposing a lot of life that you've built in the soil, hopefully, right? And exposing that to the sun and whatever is going to kill some of it. And also, one of the main reasons we're mulching here is to put a cap over a lot of our weed seeds. So if you go in there with a fork or a weasel and turn it all over, and then maybe you don't mulch for 2 weeks, because life happens, right? Weeds are just going to be everywhere, potentially, depending on the time of year. A person who lives in the Pacific Northwest has never seen a firefly. What are they like? Do they really light up at night? Yeah, they do actually light up at night. It's one of those things as kids, we went around and chased them and put them in jars, and you had enough of them, you could get a little bit of light going in a jar. They really are neat. And then they said, are they beneficial or a plant killer? They lay their larvae in one of the reasons for their decline, and there's been a massive decline. We get quite a few over here, and I'll explain why in just a second. There were tons more when I was a kid, for sure, and there's a lot less of them now. Are they beneficial? They actually are. As larvae, they actually eat snails and slugs and worms. They're predaceous. They're quite the little predators, but they typically, they need like fallen trees and old logs and things like that. That's typically where they lay their larvae. Got a person with a very loud car over here, just showing how manly he is this morning. Early on a Saturday morning, he woke up and had 7 cups of coffee. Let's see. They need old logs. That's one of the reasons I think there's been a big decline. Obviously, there's been a big decline in insect populations literally all over the world. We know that. But But the firefly specifically, I think people are over cleaning spaces. So if you live in the suburbs and you're in a neighborhood where every house is just kind of wall to wall Bermuda grass and foundation plantings and cul-de-sacs and that kind of thing, there's really not any of these types of wooded spaces like I have behind me back here. And so we have quite a few more. In an old neighborhood where not every detail is being maintained like it was, you'll see quite a few more. And so this little alley that the city owns over here beside us is just full of them in the evenings, and they're kind of fun, but they look like a little creature that would lay its larva and then it would eat plants or something. But no, it eats. It goes after slugs and snails and that kind of thing. And then in their adult life, you know, in the evenings, you'll see them with lighting up. Let's see. So this person loves camellias, has 30-year-old plants that are suckering. Should they prune them off? Are the plants in danger? Sometimes it's an indicator that plants are in danger when they're root suckering. So, you know, some sort of damage has happened to the roots under the ground and the plant is responding by trying to put up basically a new plant from the base. You'll see it, you know, up in trees too. You'll occasionally get those water sprouts, we call them, up in trees, where you all of a sudden get these vertical growth on branches. And that's typically a tree that's in some sort of stress. And it's a similar type of growth off those roots. They're like water sprouts off of roots, basically. And it can indicate that, you know, there's some damage has occurred under the ground that you don't know what it is. But yeah, I would prune those root suckers off. They are going to take energy away from the plant and crowd the existing plant out. Holly wanted to go inside, so we took care of that. Somebody, their seed mix doesn't seem to wick. Is there a remedy? Yeah, there's wetting agents that you can use on your soil mix to have them take up some water a little bit quicker. You'll notice that if you have like a 2-3-year-old bag of some sort of seed starting mix, sometimes you can put them in the trays or containers and then water it, and it just rejects the water completely. There are organic and non-organic wetting agents. You can just get an organic wetting agent. You can order it on Amazon, or maybe the garden center near you carries a wetting agent. But you can add a wetting agent to your seed mix, and that will make it wick better and also just initially get watered easier, because some of these mixes are so dry that they just reject initially getting any water into them. It can take days sometimes of soaking it, but a wetting agent will rectify that. So somebody has clay soil in Houston, Zone 9B, wants to start a garden, has St. Augustine grass. Does he have to remove all the grass and amend soil to start? What kind of amendments? Yeah, probably. I mean, St. Augustine, you know, in Bermuda grass and any of these creeping grasses, zoysia, centipede, whatever it is, you know, they're going to compete with anything you're trying to put into the bed. So, you know, St. Aug is a very thick, you know, tough version of, you know, these warm season grasses. The blades are thicker on it. It's fescue-like blade on it, but it's, if you haven't been down to Florida, it's a pretty thick grass. Usually has a lot of thatch down in the bottom of it because it's so thick. You got to be dethatched occasionally. It's just a really thick, kind of gnarly grass if you're trying to get rid of it. But yeah, you can really scalp it off over several mowings as low as you can go, and then you can get a sod cutter and cut it out, or you can spray it, whatever you want to do. It's not mine, you know, not mine to get rid of. You can cover it, and you can try to cover it in plastics and things, but I don't think that any of these warm season grasses can be killed 100% by covering them in plastic unless you left them covered for a long time. So I think at the end of the day, the way we started this garden is I didn't have St. Augustine, but we did have mondo grass and spreading Liripe spicata, which is a really nasty weed once you have it in your garden. It's the spreading Liripe, English ivy, and tons of, you know, invasive like things back here. Vinca was back here, and we scalped it to the ground and then buried it in wood chips and dared anything to poke its head up through that. And if you'll do that mowing, that first initial mowing of it in the sun on sunny day, a really hot sunny day, you can probably burn a lot of it back that way. But yes, by whatever means, you need to get rid of that St. Augustine. And then what I would do in your clay soil down there is if you can get wood chips or if it's available to you, I would get it buried in wood chips. Certainly at a minimum, some sort of compost layer, if you can get compost in bulk, to get something on top of this clay and get worms and other things working for you. You need to get soil life alive and working for you. Okay, somebody has a fire chief thuja arborvitae that had a tough winter. It's got dead outer foliage. They think it was probably too dry going into winter. What can they do to save it? Prune it, fertilize it, all kinds of questions. Walk away. This is always my suggestion when I get questions like that. The main thing you got to do is walk away from it. Make sure it's been watered since. I'm guessing it probably is coming out of winter. The soil's moist, so you're probably fine there. But a lot of times when plants get stressed, that's when we get nervous about them, and that's when we go water them and fertilize them and do all kinds of things to them. But I would wait for it to start putting on some new spring growth and let it do that for a minute before you start messing with it in any way, shape, or form. Because it's vulnerable to being killed by overwatering and things like that now. So leave it be, let it come back out from it. If it's weird shaped later, you can deal with that in the future. But for now, again, literally walk away. Do daffodils need to be divided? When and how? Yes, eventually, if daffodils are thriving year over year over year, you'll reach a point where they'll start crowding themselves a bit. And the flowers will either not be seen very well because the foliage is so thick, or you'll get smaller flowers because they're sharing so much space. The time to pop them out of the ground is as the foliage has almost faded back. So we're blooming, daffodils, as you can see, all back in the background. Those blooms will fade, but then that foliage is another 4, 5, 6 weeks potentially before it fades back to the ground. When it's almost completely faded back to the ground and you can still see them, that's the time to pop them out and divide them. But it needs to get that energy from that foliage back down into that bulb before you dig that bulb back out, before you dig the bulb out of the ground. When you cut back Brigadoon St. John's wort, which I did in the Odd Jobs video last week, can you take the longer pieces and bury them to help it spread? Yes. Yeah, if you've got a longer shoot and you need it going that direction in the bed, yeah, you can just bury a little bit of mulch on that branch going that direction. It should root in. If it didn't cause you any harm anyway, you were about to cut it off. So, but a lot of them, especially this time of year, will probably just root in place and keep spreading. Also, the act of cutting it, even if you weren't going to bury some and try to get it to spread that way, just the act of cutting it alone will encourage it to root sucker, just like we talked about in that other one, and spread as well. So you probably get some spreading just by cutting it. So somebody said, why do my cuttings, they got some boxwood cuttings and Eleagnus, have sprouts of new leaves but do not seem to be developing roots? That'll happen sometimes. You can take a branch, I can take a branch off an azalea and get it to flower, after I've taken it off the plant. You wonder, well, how could it still flower? Well, it already had the flower bud. It already had the energy. It just needed to find a warm space wherever I put it, in a greenhouse or inside or whatever, and it still opens a flower. It's still dead, if I didn't try to root it. So you can get new growth. The branch can have enough life to have side branches on it and still grow. This doesn't mean they're not going to root. I've had things, put on a little bit of growth and then still root out. So you might want to give them a little more time. But the fact that they grew new leaves is just, it had that energy in the stem that you took off when you were taking the cuttings. So somebody said, can birds distinguish between seeds and fertilizer? So if they fertilize under their bird feeder, those, yeah, absolutely. No problem. I do not like, I wish some of these plastic encapsulated fertilizers, I know the birds aren't going to eat them, but they're also don't break down very quickly in the gardens. You guys can see that from the plants you're planting in your gardens, that some of this these plastic and coated fertilizers that are used in the nursery business do not go away. They linger in our gardens for a long, long time. Birds, again, birds aren't messing with them, but they're, you know, it's another plastic we're adding to the ground, I think. Let's see. Is there a native ligustrum that is not invasive? No, I think all the ligustrum species are native to Europe and Asia. And I think, you know, there's an Australian one, but they think humans actually brought it to Australia, and but it is now considered a native plant in Australia because it's speciated. But they think humans actually are the ones who brought it there in the first place. And then I'm guessing we're going to say the same thing here. You know, in a few hundred years, I think that Ligustrum sinensis will be considered a native. It's not going anywhere. There's no possibility we could pull out all the Chinese privet. It's in the woods from, you know, the whole country. How in the world could we get it out? So it is in the process of becoming a native species. It needs a control. You know, the problem is right now it's run amok because it had no enemy. But eventually something out there will realize the seed is tasty. You know, you can't grow as a monoculture like it's growing in places. So eventually you'll have a control added to it. But nobody likes when I say this kind of thing. But it's going to be here. It's here forever. I mean, the Chinese privet is now on its way to being a native species. Again, it needs a control because it's out of control. But there's no amount of, there's 320 million people in America. If every single one of us went to work trying to get rid of Chinese privet would win. That's how, you know, I mean, it's just literally everywhere. And the seed bank would be a long, long time. If we cleaned them all out and then walked away, 10 years later, it'd be right back because all the seed is still there. So nobody likes to hear that, but that's where we are with some of these invasives, is they are in the process of naturalizing and becoming a species separate from, you know, wherever they came from, Asia or Europe or Africa or, you know, Australia or wherever they came from. So no, but I will say that sunshine ligustrum does not seed. So that's one ligustrum you could have in your garden, you know, that doesn't flower and seed. Let's see. So somebody said, what species tulip do we use? We have Baker's Lilac, Honky Tonk, Lady Jane, Little Beauty, Tarda, Tinka, Turbrin's Gem, and Turkistanica. And they're all native to like Eastern Europe and Turkey, that area, most of the species tulips. But we have a bunch of them out here. And if you're following along with the channel, they're just getting started blooming. So we'll see lots of those species tulips over the next few weeks. Somebody asked if I had ever covered rain gardens, and she wants one. Yes, 2 videos on the channel. One, an existing rain garden at NC State that we just walked around and showed off some of the plants. Second video, an actual rain garden installation, how it was built with a landscaper in Raleigh. And a third one I've shown off is a rain garden that's over at the Raleigh Rose Garden that I've shown photos of, and just kind of on these neighborhood walk-arounds, I've just shown it off a couple times, but not the construction of it. There's another question related to that coming up. Oh, it's the next one. This person has a swell that goes into a pond and wants to plant it like the Raleigh Rose Garden with all of these various plants. How do they approach it? There's a lot of works under one of those rain gardens. So it's not just a swell where you start planting things in it. There's actually some drainage in the bottom of that thing. So go back and watch that rain garden video that I have on the channel, or find other YouTube videos where people are constructing rain gardens. It's not just a swell. There's actually, again, there's some works under it. They're trying to not only get the water to go into what looks like a ditch, they're trying to get water to go down in the ground as it goes into the ditch. That's the whole point of this thing, is to try to get that water down in the ground like it's supposed to. The way rivers are supposed to work is the rain's supposed to fall from the sky, go down through this soil, and then slowly but surely with springs go out to the rivers. We've created our cities in such a way with all these roofs and sidewalks and hardscapes and streets and everything that now the water runs directly to the river, you know, through pipes and swells and streams and other things, and causes flooding. you know, with flooding related issues. Well, the best thing to do though is get this water stored underground, and then it takes a long time for that water to move underground, you know, and leave us that way. So that's the point of these rain gardens, is kind of taking into account that a lot of this water that's on our property should be going down into the ground rather than being run off and go away. So there's works under it. The whole point of that is there's materials under that you don't see that are getting, because you'll see it raining and wonder why there's no water in that hole. It actually is in that hole. It's just below the ground, in some materials that are below the ground. So watch that video or others. Okay, let's see, a couple more here. Do we edge our paths and do the wood chips stay in place? No, we do not. I don't physically edge these paths where it's all beds like this. I edge around turf, you know, because I do like crispy edges around turf, but we don't edge around these paths. But I'll mulch right up to it and try to get this curve looking pretty nice. I hope you can see me back here. I'll try to get this edge looking pretty crispy, you know, with my other mulch. Does it stay in place? Yes, they just don't move. When you get mulches that are different sizes and shapes, that's a good thing. That's the kind of mulches that will hold together. That's why that triple shredded hardwood or double shredded hardwood works so well. That's the reason pine straw works so well. It's the same shape, but it does interlock with itself. And those wood chips very quickly just kind of lock into place and stay without having to worry about them. So I have said trees and shrubs don't have an off switch. And then I call it maintainable at. So when you're buying a plant, and let's say it's this, doesn't matter, I've got other containers out here, but it doesn't matter. Let's say the tag says it gets 4 to 6 feet tall. You should look at that as maintainable at, because it's not really, there's no plant that's just gonna get to 6 feet tall and then go, unless it's a weeping plant, you know, like this redbud back here. It's going to just keep growing. I mean, you know, but the rate of growth will slow down typically around that number. So the shrubber tree will typically slow down a bit, but they do keep growing. But no, yeah, every plant is racing for light. So my dwarf Hinoki cypress, you know, I've seen them, you know, nearly 20 feet tall. Ram's got dwarf Hinoki cypress in her garden, in the Giberson garden, that's probably 20 feet tall. You know, the regular Hinoki cypress, you know, would just get absolutely gigantic. But that dwarf took a lot longer to get to 20 feet, you know. But if you looked at a tag for one, it'd probably say they only get 8 feet or 10 feet. I don't know what a tag for a dwarf Hinoki cypress says, but it probably says something like that. Basically, take the tag, what the tag says for height and width, and they say maintainable at. So if you're willing to maintain it at that height, that's what it's going to be. But that's what I would like for all the tags to just say. Let's just say maintainable at. Plus, if a plant was bred in Michigan and then it comes down to the south, you know, and it wasn't trialed here, now everything gets trialed everywhere. Trialing is much better than it used to be. Now plants are sent out years in advance to various gardens around the country, and we kind of get a feel for how they're going to grow in different places. But it used to be that things would get introduced and it'd be like, the assumption is it only gets 4 feet tall. Well, tell that to it in Georgia, you know, where the summers, you know, a month longer on each side, you know, of what, you know, it is in the north. And so that can have part of it, part of the plant, part of the issue too, you know, is where you're at with that plant as well. So I'll leave it there for this week. I'm trying to ask questions on this one pretty soon. If you got to have a question for this next week, I'm going to have to shoot this next one pretty early in the week. I've got some travel coming up so I need to get this. I need to get next Sunday shot early in the week. That's all I'm saying. If you asked a question like Tuesday or Wednesday, I may have already shot the video. And thank you guys so much for considering the weekly garden planner. We're pretty proud of where we're heading with this thing. And the difference between the two is, you know, the Learn to Garden video series. If you know somebody who's new to gardening, you know, needs to learn all the basics of gardening, I think that's where they would go. If you have an existing garden and you just want to know how to maintain it and you just want to know what to do this week or that time, that's what the weekly garden planner is going to be. And again, there's a $30 discount through the end of April. Thank you for considering it, and thanks for watching.